23rd of July, 2006, 3:30 p.m. A giant inflatable artwork, Dreamspace, broke free from its moorings at Riverside Park in Chesterley Street, carried away by a gust of wind. Around 30 people were inside the sculpture, described as a walk through a psychedelic, dreamlike maze. 2 were killed, and many others seriously injured. CCTV captured the moment of tragedy, footage that has haunted the minds of all that have seen it. But what really happened here? What is the history of this fascinating and terrible sculpture? And what lessons can we learn from it? This is the story of Dreamspace. Dreamspace was the creation of London-born artist Maurice Agis, who had initially studied painting and sculpture at the prestigious St. Martin's School of Art on Charing Cross Road, thought to be where he first encountered abstract sculpture from names like Anthony Caro. His early works, abstractions of stone and steel in sculpture, were displayed in 1961 at the Young Contemporaries exhibition, alongside such famous names as David Hockney and Alan Jones. He soon became a well-known face at the Chelsea School of Arts, and went on to further study in Holland, where he became inspired by the art movement known as de Stijl, described as the utopian ideal of spiritual harmony, founded by Piet Mondrian and Theo van Doesburg, amongst others. This abstract art, comprised of primary colours and simple geometric forms, may be thought of as a search for universal values and aesthetics, or as Mondrian put it, something higher than reality, representing a kind of universal harmony wherein all aspects of life are found in the abstraction of form and shape. For Agus, who enjoyed discussing this type of art with fellow student Peter Jones, his fascination with this movement led to him eventually growing tired of the traditional world of gallery and museum. And together with Jones, he set up a basement studio in Fulham, London, to work on what was then described as a study in colour and space. The idea was to remove art from the constraints of the gallery, to create works that were interactive and accessible to the man on the street, but that still retained the suggestion of deeper meaning that they found in their inspirations like Mondrian. Their first attempts were rather short-lived. Coloured tubes placed in the street, where passerbys were invited to walk inside. Real success, though, came in October 1966, where their first major show was opened at the Museum of Modern Art in Oxford. The installation, known as Space Place, comprised of coloured PVC panels arranged into an abstract walk-through art piece, and it quickly became a hit with the public and art world alike, even winning the coveted Sikkens Prize when the installation was shown the following year in the Netherlands. The work was inspired not only by de Stijl, but of public spaces in cities and towns, such as crossroads, plazas, and corners, areas where serendipity or chance encounters may be encouraged to occur, and where people may pause to rest, eat, or join together with others. These are the spaces where the city speaks, where poems and songs are daily heard, where the artist etches his visions on the wall, In Spaceplace, our relationship with such areas was explored. A three-dimensional Dishteel landscape, where people were encouraged to walk, talk, and interact with others. The piece could also be easily moved, erected at festivals and parks for short periods of time, like a travelling attraction, thereby achieving the artist's goal of removing art from the walls of the gallery. Spaceplace was exhibited for nearly 20 years, ending in 1980 when Agis and Jones went their separate ways, by which time Agis had developed plans for a larger and more advanced art project than ever before. It was to be his first solo project, and would build on the success of Spaceplace as well as his experience in the wider art world. After all, he had taught in various schools since 1973, and was one of the founders of Butler's Wharf, derelict warehouses where artists, poets and eccentrics gathered in the 1970s, fueled by the psychedelic world of counterculture, artistic expression, and alternative lifestyles. His solo project, Colorspace, would reflect this hazy and dreamlike world seen at Butler's Wharf. It was debuted in London in the year 1980, and instead of solid PVC panels like before, this time the installation was an inflatable maze, with lighting and sound effects creating what Agis described as something surreal, magic, like swimming in a sea of changing colours. It was comprised of 49 identical inflatable units, arranged in an abstract geometric pattern, juxtaposed by constantly changing colours and lights. Archive footage of it still exists, and one can clearly see the echoes of the Dreamspace project still to come, including its eventual tragedy. After all, when Colorspace was installed in the German seaside town of Travemünde in 1986, it lifted from the ground during a sudden storm, and began to float outwards to sea, eventually catching on a seafront flagpole, where it fell to the ground, resulting in the injuries of multiple people who were inside the structure at the time. From one moment to the next, the structure was there, and then it wasn't, one witness said. It just took off before my very eyes. Another witness, actually inside the sculpture when it took off, described it as feeling like an airbed, with colours and lights inducing a kind of meditation. But then, I had the feeling of flying. Then we fell downwards, so I spread my jacket open wide, and then I felt as though the structure was ripping somehow. Then I held my hands and jacket out like wings and looked to the side, and I saw, I think, one person fly past me. They were curled into a ball, so they fell more quickly, and then there is something missing from my memory. It was not the only time such a thing had happened either. 2 years later, in 1988, Agis had placed a sculpture at the Glasgow Garden Festival, comprised of 7 inflatable sections, each around the size of a hot air balloon, and each designed to float on top of a body of water. Wind lifted one of them into the air, resulting in both a marine contractor by the name of Rex Lyons and Agis himself being swept up into the air. According to witnesses, Lyons fell into the river and emerged unharmed, while Agis, clinging for some time onto a length of rope attached to the balloon, eventually fell to the ground and suffered an injury to his back. The dawn of the inflatable artwork had been a disaster, and one may be forgiven for thinking the story would end there, a footnote in the history of safety and near misses. Agis, however, was not deterred from continuing his solo project, and began work on reassessing and rebuilding his walk-through sculpture, soon to be reborn into something far larger and more tragic than ever seen before. Dreamspace was first launched in 1996 as part of a commission for the Copenhagen City of Culture project, and a sum of £60,000 was later awarded from the Arts Council of England to help Agis further develop it. It was essentially a new version of his earlier Colorspace project, but now grown far larger and more elaborate than he had ever imagined possible before. Agis described it as a blending of space, movement, colour, and sound, going on to explain that the experience, somewhat spiritual in nature, aimed to release one from the chaos and fragmentation of the senses caught up in the urban experience of daily life. The structure itself was made from 157 interlocking PVC pods, each 5 meters tall, and forming a structure of 2,500 square meters in size, around half the size of a football pitch. Inside, this womb-like maze was adorned with neon lights, atmospheric sound, and lighting effects, and visitors were asked to remove their shoes and wear colourful smocks whilst inside the art piece, thereby camouflaging them so that they seemed to merge and become one with the strange giant sculpture. It was designed to be both fun and somewhat disorientating, building on his earlier inspirations with serendipity, abstract art, and the nature of reality. Like Agis's other attractions, it was also designed as a travelling exhibit, and in the years that followed it visited events at various towns and cities across Europe, and feedback from the public was almost entirely positive, with reports of dreamlike and surreal experiences, of something which felt completely out of the ordinary, never to be forgotten, nor replicated elsewhere. To me, the appeal of Dreamspace seemed to lie not just in its abstract expression of space and reality, but in its unique position as a travelling attraction. In our early childhoods, many of us entered such colourful dreamscapes in the form of ball pits, the soft play centres of long-lost holidays, and the strange and even frightening world of funhouses. Things which, due to their small sizes, we very quickly outgrew, and are thus left as a kind of hazy memory. A world that seems somehow closer to dream than of reality. In this sensory overload of lights, scents, and shapes, may be found our first explorations of wonder and fear, of the liminal spaces of childhood that are later infused with the yearning of nostalgia, of wondering where that colourful world was, why we were there, and what meaning, if any, it still holds for us in our memories. Dreamspace surely was akin to reawakening such a world, like walking through the synapses of dream and memory, of being awarded glimpses of that long-lost world of childhood, and of seeing it with fresh eyes that ponder now on the meaning of space and time, of things that have a tactile outward appearance, but a deeper beauty concealed within, reflecting perhaps the true nature of these things, as Mondrian may say of his art, when the veil of form and separation is removed, resulting in the non-dual, primal remembrance of things past, their spirit, and true meaning. Whatever the appeal, it was certainly popular, and the Arts Council approved of the installation being featured in towns like Chesterley Street, where no galleries or visual art trails existed, and thus Agis's piece would accomplish his goal of bringing art, and the meaning it gives us, to a wider public who might otherwise have never known it. For this reason, Dreamspace was given the green light to appear at a festival in the town in July 2006, moving there after a brief stint at another festival in Liverpool the month beforehand. While in Liverpool, though, the first problems began to appear with Dreamspace. Hours before it was due to open, vandals broke into the grounds and slashed the inflatable sculpture with knives, resulting in a delayed opening as emergency repairs were carried out. It was also closed several times due to gusty winds, with visitors inside asked to leave as a matter of precaution. Following this, 3 of the PVC pods were fully replaced, and the sculpture was moved to its next stop on the touring circuit, Riverside Park in Chesterley Street, installed on the 22nd of July. The following day, at least from the perspective of the public, everything seemed to be okay. However, a cleaner who had entered Dreamspace before it opened noticed something odd. It seemed to be rippling, the floor rising from the ground as she vacuumed the enormous art piece. Soon after opening to the public, the same thing happened, this time with a little more force, enough for the visitors to be evacuated as a matter of safety. Agus was informed, and ordered more ropes and pegs to be attached to the sculpture. That said, he soon wanted to go for a refreshment break, and ordered his staff to resume their duties of letting people into the attraction. Visitors paid, took off their shoes and donned their colourful cloaks, and continued to explore the strange world of Dreamspace. What happened next was truly terrifying. All of a sudden it just started rising like a balloon, said one unnamed witness. It was flinging people over, and then it just seemed to flip over in the air. Another reported hearing loud snapping noises as the pegs and ropes were ripped out of the ground, and many reported hearing people inside screaming as it went into the air and started gaining speed. Dreamspace, now free of its moorings, was lifted over 30 feet into the air and drifted airborne for over 150 feet, eventually colliding with one of the CCTV poles which recorded the incident. Following this, it fell to the ground and began to deflate. The screams continued for 15 minutes after it landed, said a witness to this horror. Public, police, and the on-site fire and rescue service rushed to the scene, cutting open the sculpture and looking for signs of life inside. It was like a war scene, said one of the firefighters. There were people lying around all over the place. Elizabeth Ann Collings and Claire Firmage were confirmed dead at the scene of the accident, and 13 others were described as suffering catastrophic injuries. Amongst them was a 3-year-old girl, Rosie Wright, who survived with a punctured lung, fractured spine, and a bleed to the brain, having first fallen from the sculpture and then being crushed by one of the electric fans used to heat it. Other survivors were airlifted to hospital and assessed at the scene, with a total of 27 people recorded as injured by the doomed artwork, which now laid in tatters on the grounds of a festival field grown suddenly silent. And for Maurice Agis, the dream was over. In 2008, Maurice Agis was charged with manslaughter, as well as a breach of the Health and Safety Act, following the disaster with his Dreamspace project. It resulted in a 4-week trial at the Crown Court, where Agis denied the charges, and after 11 hours of deliberation, a jury was unable to reach a verdict on the case. So what really happened here? Could the tragedy have been prevented? Initially, foul play was suspected as a reason for the incident. Could vandals have tampered with the installation, just as they did previously when it was erected in Liverpool? Allegedly, the jury heard that 3 ropes on the western side of the sculpture had indeed been found cut, likely a deliberate act with scissors. Was this to blame for the accident? Further investigation found that the ropes and pegs were of poor quality, and had actually been purchased from a nearby branch of B&Q by the events team just prior to the accident. Furthermore, when Agis interrupted them wishing to take a tea break, the job of securing the sculpture was left abruptly incomplete, with no additional ropes added to the rear of the sculpture. It was also suggested that no calculations of wind speed, direction, or safe operating conditions had ever been undertaken by Agus. Despite this, the piece was still given the go-ahead to appear at the festival. In 2009, Agus was fined £10,000 for health and safety offences, a sum later reduced to £2,500 following an appeal. Eventually, events team Brouhaha International and Chesterley Street Council were found equally at fault for the Dreamspace disaster, with Brouhaha said to have shown serious failings with regards to its safety procedures in securing the artwork. According to the High Court, Brouhaha did not recognise the dangers of anyone entering the structure, and were at serious fault in failing to recognise the inadequacy of Agus's risk assessment of the sculpture. Inflatable rides and attractions remain, according to the National Association of Amusement Ride Safety, amongst the most dangerous of all kinds of ride and attraction. You see more injuries on inflatables than any other amusement ride, said industry expert Jim Barber. Far more than roller coasters. Here we are reminded of the unstoppable forces of nature, of the reasons our beloved rides close when high winds or extreme weather arrives. Just as Agis wanted us to explore our relationship with spaces and reality, here is the face of natural power, of the necessity of balancing our temporary pleasures with the reality of the world we build them in, and of never taking their safety for granted. That said, the legacy of Dreamspace still lives today. Attractions like Luminaria, designed by company Architects of Air, can still be found today at festivals and events around the world. Like Dreamspace, these attractions are inspired by geometric and natural forms, as well as the architecture of cathedrals and religious buildings, and they contain effects more dizzying and advanced than ever seen before. They are very popular too. Tickets often sell out long in advance, and many travel to such festivals just for the chance to experience this weird and wonderful world. Maurice Agis died in October 2009 in hospital in Spain. He never gave his personal perspective on the disaster, and no further details were released on his life or death. His solicitor could not be contacted for comment, and no verdict was ever reached on his involvement with the event that took place. "I have no feelings towards Agus one way or the other," said the father of the little girl Rosie, injured in the sculpture. "As far as I know, he never apologized."